Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is David Tong from TGR Foundation, a Tiger Woods charity. We welcome everyone to our digital workshop today on PBL Planning 2.0, getting a jump start on next year. We're happy to have you all join us virtually today. And before I hand it off to our amazing facilitators, I want to share briefly about TGR Foundation and who we are. And we've been around for over 24 years developing programs for educators, students, and their communities to help unlock student potential and empower them to pursue their passions through education. And you can find a collection of free resources and other information about our many programs at tgrfoundation.org, which we'll paste in the chat. And if you also weren't able to join us in our digital workshops last month that also dove into some of the components of PBL, you can find those archived videos on our educator YouTube playlist, which is also located on our website as well. And we'll show these links towards the end of the workshop today. All right, and without further ado, I'd like to have us hand it off to Jess Kessler, and she'll kick us off with today.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. It's awesome and amazing to see everyone today. Thank you guys so much for being here. We truly thank you for joining us. We definitely understand that during these times of pandemic and civil and social unrest, that there's a lot on everyone's plate and a lot on your mind. So we do not take for granted the fact that you have chosen to spend this time with us today. So again, we really thank you. Once again, my name is Jessica Kessler. I am a professional development facilitator for the foundation and one of your co-facilitators for today. And I'll allow my other facilitator to introduce herself as well.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Holly Denard. I am with Jess as a professional development facilitator here at the TGR Foundation. I just want to reiterate what Jess said and congratulate all of you that have finished out your school year. Very, very challenging and difficult year to finish. And for those of you still in the midst of it, you know, thank you for hanging in there and being the awesome educators that you are. And thank you again for joining us today as we look at project-based learning 2.0 today. All right, Jess, let's get going.
Yes, let's do it. So as always, we just want to start off with our norms. One, we have muted everyone's microphones, and we ask that you just stay muted until you're ready to speak out loud, just to avoid any background noises. We know you're home with your families and your pets, so we just want to minimize any distractions. Secondly, please turn your cameras on if you would like. We would love to engage with you. We would love to interact with you, see your smiling face, see the joy that comes over you when you talk about project-based learning. So feel free to turn your cameras on. And lastly, but certainly not least, we want to keep this a collaborative environment. So feel free to use that chat box throughout the entire workshop. Raise hand feature, ask your questions, put in your comments, your thoughts. We would love to continue to hear from you throughout. But also we'll have an opportunity for you guys to work in groups today. So that will be an amazing opportunity for you to even unmute yourselves, turn those cameras on, and really engage with each other as we work together on some activities that Holly will lead us through a little bit later. That being said, our agenda today is really to review project-based learning. So if you did not get a chance to tune into our first project-based learning video, we highly encourage you to go to our YouTube page with the TGR Foundation and check it out, because there was a lot of great information that we covered in that first video. And we're going to recap some of that at the start of this, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper today. We will also be talking about how to get a jump start on project-based learning, right? We don't want to wait until the next school year, until we're sitting in the classroom to think about this next lesson. We want to get a jump on it now, because there are some really proactive steps that you can take right now to get thinking about it, so that as soon as you start the school year, you are ready to go. And lastly, we're going to talk about pre-planning, how you can use a tool and resource that we have at the TGR Foundation to get your pre-planning process started. And we're even going to model some of those steps with Holly as well. So just to recap, some design elements, project-based learning, what is it? What does it incorporate? It is definitely about challenging problems and questions. It's about using this opportunity, a project, to create an authentic environment where you can really allow student voice and choice, allow them to reflect, critique, and revise, and come up with something that's really going to be influential, not only in the classroom, but in the community as well. So project-based learning has some core components that Holly touched on in our first PBL workshop. And one of which is that the project is really a vehicle that guides the curriculum and instruction. It's an opportunity to really incorporate different pieces of curriculum and instruction into one holistic aspect. And it begins with a challenging problem or question, something that really entices students to think beyond the classroom, something that connects to the real world, something that is really going to be meaningful for them so that they can get engaged in it and they can get excited about it. And lastly, it involves a lot of student voice. So while you, the educator, are doing all this pre-planning and planning in the background, the students are the ones that are propelling this project forward, and you are giving them the tools to be able to apply this to other opportunities, improve their process, and reflect on all the things that they've learned through this PBL process. So with that being said, I would love to ask you guys this question. What are some of the benefits of project-based learning? And in order to answer this, I'm going to ask you guys to go to www.menti.com. You're going to use the code 924805. And we're going to ask you if you could type in as many responses as possible. What are some benefits of project-based learning? For those of you who have used project-based learning before, this is your time to shine, because you're really going to go in there and you're going to type in as many things as you can think of. And if you haven't used project-based learning yet, just consider the information I just gave you, and consider, what are some benefits of students being able to go into a problem-based project where they get to solve, use their student voice, and all those other things.
So it looks like a lot of great input. So we have interdisciplinary opportunities, aligning problem solving in schools, future inventors and innovators, helping build real world skills and knowledge. I like this one, students taking ownership and driving their own learning.
Love it. Thank you, David. And sorry guys for the technical difficulties, but that's awesome. All right. So those are all dead on. And as we continue with this, here we go. So thinking about all the things that you guys have inputted into that Menti, that thank you, David, was so graciously able to share with us. The big picture is that project-based learning really allows for students to take ownership, which you guys have said, students to exhibit creativity in ways that they might not be able to in traditional lecture-based instruction, and it allows them to collaborate. And we're going to talk about collaboration a little later, but don't think just because we have now a classroom environment that has separated us that collaboration is still not possible, because it certainly is possible, and we want to consider that when we're doing these project-based learning activities. Also, critical thinking like this, because we're challenging students with a problem, because we're allowing for their student voice, because we're allowing them to really drive this project forward. Imagine the amount of critical thinking that is happening in that child's mind when they are going through all of these steps and processes. But not only that, so those are our 4 crucial components of project-based learning. But we also want to think about the fact that we've actually been in a weird classroom environment, or a new classroom environment lately, that has caused some of us to be distance learning for a large period of time. Some people were even hybrid, and a whole bunch of other different kind of learning scenarios. And project-based learning actually allows some benefits for those different environments, because it allows you to review new information while or older information while you're introducing new concepts. So think about, maybe there were some skills or some gaps that happened during those 2 or 3 months of distance learning. This is a great opportunity to fold in some of those things that they should have learned, some of those things that you want to reinforce and build on, and then introduce new topics on top of that in order to really give them that holistic perspective, build on that prior knowledge, get them up to speed while still progressing forward. So it's not like you have to stop, because that's the worst thing that can happen, right? Is that you have to stop your current instruction just to get everybody up to speed. We know you lose time that way. We know you don't get the best benefits that way. So project-based learning allows you to keep moving forward while still taking the opportunity to review the things that they should have learned before. You can also incorporate cross-curricular opportunities and maximize on the class time. Time is everyone's biggest challenge. Every educator's challenge is time. And project-based learning is one way to maximize on it. Think about the fact that you may not have seen your students every day like before when you were sitting in the class with them. You might now only see them a few times a week. Maybe your time is shorter than it used to be. By giving them this project-based learning classroom scenario in this lesson or unit, you give the opportunity for students to continue to progress forward even when you're not meeting in that class time. It also allows you to collaborate with other educators so that both of you are meeting your learning objectives and, again, maximizing on that class time so that each of you are able to see students move forward in all of your classes. Also consider the fact that this allows you to really incorporate some new technology and engage students wherever they are. So I know the CDC has recommended, desks, even if we go back into the classroom, desks will be 6 feet apart. So how can we have groups, right? How can we have project-based learning activities that way? It's still possible. And the way we can do that is using some technology to bridge those gaps. How can you use a Google Doc? How can you use a shared platform in order to bridge some of those gaps and allow students to really continue to work collaboratively? So project-based learning has its natural benefits that we saw even when we were in the classroom, but I think now stepping back and coming into this virtual environment, it still offers an abundance of benefits. So with that being said, as always, PBL is not something to add to the plate. We do not want to continue to stress teachers out. We don't want to add anything else to your already overflowing abundant plates. We want you to just rearrange some things, look at them a little differently, and even fold some things together in this project-based learning model. So I know Menti is going to not work very well for us or the way we intended it to work. So I'm going to ask if you put these comments into the chat box, and that way I'll be able to read them. And David, if anything comes up, or Holly, anything comes up, feel free to shout them out. But thinking about next year, and I know time is going to be the first thing you say, so I want you to ignore time. Don't think about timing, okay? But thinking about your next year, what supports or materials do you think you will need in order to get PBL started? All right, so thinking about getting that jump start, what you need to get started. Is it something in the classroom? Is it people? Is it the students? What part of this do you need to get started with your PBL lesson or unit for next year? So I'm gonna give you some time, as always, to add some stuff to the chat box. Okay, all the equipment in your classroom, understandable. So we're just gonna see what we can do to get them to get everything from your classroom into your living room. How to use the technology to encourage collaboration, love that. Looking for some guiding documents, love that. I owe you $5 because I don't really have $5, but I owe you $5 because that is spot on. Ideas on what to do that's appropriate, love that. Some resources such as a community for mentorship and coaches, awesome. Mainly ideas, love that too. Figuring out the objectives, that's a big one. Setting the classroom up for as the third teacher, social distance style, okay. Awesome, keep those coming because I want to take these in consideration as we continue to move through this. Connect current curriculum, right, absolutely. So Holly, you see anything or any comments?
Yeah, I see some great stuff as well, Jess. Some materials, organizational partner in the classroom, access for students to internet and tech, always a reality as well. And as we're in this distance learning environment.
Absolutely.
How to basically get our students to work in this use the digital tools. So those are all some things as well, collaboration. Hopefully throughout this, you'll get some new ideas on how we can build in that collaborative environment still in this distance learning environment.
Absolutely. And I would say, Holly, to all of those, that's why we want to start now, right? And I know we cherish our summer breaks, but before we get into the real relaxed summer, right, just as we're coming out of the school year, I think there are some things that we can do to just preempt some of this thing, right? We talk a lot about tech tools and wanting them, but when do we ever have time to really explore them, right? So thinking about what tech tools you might even need for next year now is a great jumpstart to getting that PBL going, because you'll know what tools you can use, what platforms to set up, and you'll have a get-go already to get started with that. So what we're going to go through now is a project-based learning planning checklist. This is how we can get a jump start on PBL as early as now, and even before we get kicked off with the new year. So while I'm going through this, David and John on our TGR team are actually going to post in the chat box, which they already have, a link to the full fleshed out planning checklist. I'm going to go by piece, and then the larger component of it will pop up at the end. But I'm going to go through it part by part. So if you have this, you can open it up. You can take a look at it as we're going, highlight some things. And as I'm going through this, if you have any comments, please add them to the chat box. Because we would love to hear your thoughts on this. Holly, if you see anything pop up as I'm going, feel free to chime in and add those into the mix. And we want to walk you through this checklist as well as provide you with some resources a little bit later. So on this checklist, we have pre-planning, stakeholder, scope and sequence, communication, and of course, prep and planning, right? So moving through this and diving into this, pre-planning is so important. And one thing that we have for you guys to help you pre-plan is a PBL pre-planning tool, okay? And John, I believe, is going to also be pasting that into the chat box at this time. And it is a full guide from our foundation that will help you pre-plan, not only for what do you want this project to be, what are some interdisciplinary connections, what are some different tools and stuff that you want to use, but it'll also walk you step by step on how to layer each one of those things out. And Holly is going to be using a piece of that a little bit later to really help illustrate how useful this pre-planning guide was going to be. So the reason why I owe somebody in the chat box $5 is because that's exactly what we wanted to give you today, this resource, this tool to help you get started and help you plan it out. Again, I do not have $5. But I owe you one. I owe you like a Skittle or a Tic Tac or something when I see you. Also, we want to consider stakeholder buy-in. So this is one of the things that we don't think about until the very last second, but I highly encourage you to think about it now. You want to identify who are the key participants that you're going to need support from in order for this to be successful. And by key participants, I mean, what other teachers could you enlist to help you out with this, to support you? What about your administration, right? How can they be supporting you? You said you need all the materials from your classroom to show up in your living room tomorrow. Like, how can you get your administrators that buy-in to show them, like, this is going to be important, right? And you want to create that elevator pitch / email or whatever communication you have to really get them on board. Sell it. This is your selling point. Like, I really need your help because this is for our students and our students really need this, right? Create that call to action for those key stakeholders so that once the year gets started, you already have people in place to support you to help you carry out this goal for this project-based learning lesson. Then scope and sequence. So once you have some key stakeholders, people are bought in, you started the pre-planning process, you can actually go in and start scope and sequencing out what you want this project to look like. And as I said, Holly's going to show you a part of that pre-planning guide, but she's also going to just highlight in that guide that there's a portion of that guide that allows you to go in and break down each lesson that you need to build up to your project-based learning. I know we think of PBL, we think of one large culminating project, but there are steps to get there. What do your students need to know in order to be successful in that final project? And you want to consider the timeline of this, because now that you have all these stakeholders that are ready and willing to support you, you want to let them know in June, I'm going to be calling you 5 times a day, right? And, you know, April, this is when I'm going to need my administrators to make sure I have, you know, microscopes or something like that. You want to make sure that you're planning this out so that everybody knows when they're needed and they can keep an eye out for what you're going to need to support you. Communication, super, super important. You want to be open about this communication. You don't want to ask for someone's help and then all of a sudden they don't hear from you for 7 months, and then you pop back up and say, oh yeah, by the way, didn't you say you would help me with this thing? And they're gonna be like, what? No, thank you, bye. So you want to make sure that you're communicating. What's progress reports, status updates, solicit their thoughts and feedback on your project. So even as you finish out that scope and sequence, ask some people for some feedback. Say, what do you think about this? Do you think this will work with your kids too? Do you think you could add in some math concepts for me? What about some ELA concepts that you can get in there? Some history, some art? What are some different ways that, you know, we can support each other with this? And start that communication so that everybody's kind of on the same page. And again, it's continual buy-in. It's making sure that everybody is on track with what you have to offer. And lastly, you want to prep and continue planning. So it might take a while for you to get your entire classroom into your living room. So maybe you want to start thinking about what that process is going to take now. Can you collect some of those larger items and those bigger things throughout the summer very strategically so that you're ready to go when the new year starts? And also, what are some of those technologies that you can play with now? So if you're thinking about using Mentimeter, which let me down today, but is very useful. If you're thinking about using Mentimeter, this is the time to play with it, right? Get used to it, get familiar with it. If you want to set up that new Google Classroom, or I see a lot of teachers creating those animated classrooms where it's like their little emoji person, a little avatar person walking around the classroom with different selections. Like, this is the time to start thinking about that and start setting those up. You don't want to leave those things for the last minute for when you're already back in the building, school building. So this is a prime time for that. And of course, in that TGR planning guide, we gave you a final project planning tool. So, because we just want to make your life easier. We just love making your life easier. So we want to give you that planning tool at the end of that guide that John has already shared out. And we want you guys to really scope out what that final project looks like. So if they're building a robot by the end of the year, really scoping what it is that all those pieces will look like, what are the resources that students need, what are the things that are going to guide you through that process into your final project. All right.
Hey, Jess, I saw a great comment in the chat box here. I just kind of want to highlight it because it was very well said. Going back to your stakeholder buy-in, Samantha had a great comment about, is this meaning just our admin, or would this also apply to community partners, like in doing a service or learning project? Yeah, so great comment in there. I also definitely think a stakeholder would be that person in the community as well as admin. So great. Thank you so much for offering that.
I would even add parents, right? You might need parent participation, parents to get on board with something. Those community members, you know, anyone who can be essential and help to drive this forward. It could be a guest speaker, right? If you're doing something in a history or social studies class and you want to have somebody come in and do a presentation for your students, this will be a time to start catching up with some of those people before their calendars get too busy and things like that. So you definitely, a stakeholder is whoever is going to help support, really enhance the experience for your students and really help you to drive this vision forward.
Hey Jess, Christy had an interesting question as well regarding grant writing.
Grant writing opportunities in order to obtain. This is awesome, Christy. I love the idea of grant writing opportunities. I would even ask if you could bring that conversation into Create Cafe later on. So right after this, we'll have a Create Cafe so you can stay in and we can talk about that. I don't have any comments to give right now that would be beneficial to the whole group as far as grant writing is concerned. But if you bring that into Create Cafe, we can definitely talk about some ways in which to incorporate some of those things as well. Love it. Keep those comments coming. Mark, I saw a comment for you from you as well about should buy-in be to be able to understand the project as a whole so they can explain to the community, their partners. Absolutely, right? So you want them, that's why you create that elevator pitch. You want them to understand your vision and you want them to be able to feel like they could be a part of that vision and really what that vision is going to look like for the success of students. So those are awesome. Keep those coming, guys. So that being said, you guys have this planning checklist, and I want you to hold this near and dear to your heart. Keep it as a present from us to you. and I want you to really go through this guide. But we're going to take a jump back to that pre-planning part, that very first step. And this is where Holly is going to pick up, and I'm going to pass the torch over to her. But pre-planning, thinking about what it is that you want to do, all the pieces that are kind of related to that, those interdisciplinary connections, that content mapping, that's what Holly's going to walk us through an activity to do together today, so that you guys can have that first step of this pre-planning checklist kind of already in motion before you leave us today. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Holly.
All right, great. Thanks, Jess, and thanks for highlighting those design elements of project-based learning, the key points of project-based learning, as well as making sure that we all kind of get that frame of mind that project-based learning is not about adding more to the plate, it's just rearranging. So I really, really like that analogy, and just want to make sure that that's something we keep in the back of our mind as we go through a project-based learning unit. Also, that pre-planning or the planning checklist is going to be really, really helpful. So what we're going to do now is, like Jess said, we're going to talk about or focus on the pre-planning element of your project-based learning unit. And with that being said, we're going to highlight on the first page, the pre-planning page in the PDF document that you have. At the bottom, it highlights content mapping. And content mapping is really looking at the concepts that students are going to need to know as they move in towards working on that final project. So how do we take and scaffold them and build on knowledge in order for them to be successful in that final project? All right, so we're going to have you guys help us participate here in our just a little practice thing on content mapping. As you can see on the screen right here, we have a really cool diagram, and I'm going to explain a little bit about the background in this diagram. In the center circle, you're going to see the word ecosystems. That's going to be our topic. That's going to be the center of what we're doing in this content mapping. The outer circles really represent the different concepts that students are going to need to know in order to understand this idea of ecosystems, our topic focus. They're interconnected, and that's another thing we really want to stress here, is these concepts are going to be connected. So as we think about content mapping, what are the concepts and how are they interconnected to our topic? All right, so we're going to dive right in all right, there we go. All right, we're going to dive right in. So we're going to be using a feature on Zoom called Breakout Rooms. And for some of us, we're very familiar. Others of us may not have ever experienced this breakout room idea. But we're going to be breaking off into breakout rooms. When you get into your breakout room, and you're going to see a Google slide, okay? When we move you into your breakout rooms, you're going to see a breakout room number. That breakout room number is corresponding to the Google slide number that your group will be working on. All right, so the first thing I want you guys to do is, even before we start on the steps of this activity, what I want you to do is, when you get into your rooms, is introduce yourself. Talk a little bit about where you're from, how you got here to this digital workshop, and just share out with the rest of your group who you are. Also, there's going to be one person that should probably be the person that's going to be your, to write out your different ideas. And I'll explain that in a minute. So somebody who's going to actually be typing in on your Google slides. So introduce yourself first, and maybe decide on that one person that will take on that role. All right, so the three things about content mapping. The three key steps in this content map is, we first want you to brainstorm all the ideas around this topic of ecosystems. So think divergently, think in broadly. What are all the things? And we just want you to throw out all your ideas and onto that step one, brainstorm. All right, step two, we're going to then, in another portion of the Google slide, you're going to prioritize, okay? What are some of those brainstorm ideas you came up with in step 1 that you really feel are the most important? So prioritizing, so thinking a little bit more convergently. And then the third step in this content mapping exercise or activity is going to be numbering. What are those things that you would feel need to happen first in order to scaffold students to this bigger idea and building upon knowledge, okay? So sequence those. All right, so we're gonna be sending you guys into those breakout rooms in just 1 minute. I'll be hanging out with you guys, popping in a couple of different rooms. But we want you, you're gonna be seeing all of the different slides from all the different breakout rooms. We want you to really focus on your own slide and those 3 steps that you and your group are gonna be going through together for 15 minutes. After that 15 minutes, we'll give you guys a little heads up. We'll be sending you in a message, and David I'll explain that more in a second. But we really, after that 15 minutes, we want you to do a little bit of a gallery walk. We want you to hang out with all the other slides and check out what other groups have brainstormed and come up with in terms of this topic of ecosystems, okay? So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to David so that he can give you a bit more detail on the tech side of moving you guys into your breakout rooms.
All right, welcome back, everyone. You know, I know there's a lot of planning that was happening. Some of the brainstorming, as Amy mentioned. Sorry to take you guys out. You guys are more than welcome to continue in Create Cafe afterwards as well. But you know, we do want to be respectful of everyone's time as well, since we are trying to end at the half hour today. So I'm gonna hand it back to Holly to kind of talk about what was done.
You know what, the best part about this was that, oh, we didn't have enough time. We were just getting into it. I love that comment. That makes my heart warm. So I was able to kind of pop into different groups and see what they were doing. I think we're gonna highlight just one because I've noticed that you guys were so into your, what you were doing in your process and getting to know everybody in your group that we weren't able to go through a gallery walk. But so with that being said, I do want to just kind of highlight these 3 different steps. And then I want you guys to share in the chat box what this process was like. What were some of the benefits of collaborating in a group with these 3 steps, brainstorming and then prioritizing and then kind of sequencing each of the steps that you in your highlighted section number 2. So here in group 1, we've got a lot of ideas that came to fruition here, and then it looks like we moved over to kind of highlight that some key points, teaching young students about social ecosystems within classrooms. I really like your spin on this topic of ecosystems, and then laying it out in sequence, defining an ecosystem. How does this relate to the classroom, and then making connections with students by giving them concrete examples from the classroom. So I love you guys' spin on this. You can probably check out everybody's and see that everybody has a different approach, and that's the beauty of this, is that there's not one way to do this content mapping. But once we understand the steps in the process, going through the pieces become that much easier. So great. So what was this like for you guys? Anybody want to share out, or are you already sharing out and I'm not paying attention? What was this process like for you, this content mapping and working in a small group like that?
I can see, Holly, that they had a lot of fun. I see a lot of group shout outs to group 1 and group 4 and all the other ones.
I love that. We got that team camaraderie going already. That was perfect. So yeah, thank you guys for sharing that. We're really excited that you're excited about this process, obviously. But I want to kind of click over and keep on sharing your ideas in the chat box there, so that everybody, as you're throwing out your ideas, because I see things like great collaboration, it was fun hearing everybody's opinion. So keep that in mind as you start thinking about doing project-based learning with your students. This is actually fun for students to start learning how to communicate, how to work together, hearing everyone's ideas and perspectives. So this is just as much a part for us, as well as translating that in the classroom with our students, enabling them to have that voice and have their perspective heard. All right, so this slide here is just a little bit of what we just did. You can see at the bottom of this pre-planning guide is that content mapping idea. The rest of this document that we shared with you guys is then taking one of those topics or one of those things that you on step 3 and really laying it out and looking at how you're actually going to scaffold your students in that particular content. So look at the document. The next page is taking one lesson and breaking it down into that 5E instructional model. How are you going to engage, explore that particular concept, how students explain their learning, elaborate and apply their learning, and finally, how are you going to check for understanding and then evaluate? All right, so without spending too much more time, we do want to offer, if you all have questions or just concerns or really want to share out more and collaborate more with us, we are going to have what's called our Create Cafe right after our digital workshop. It's just a really informal platform, so we ask if you want to participate. We hope you do join us, but it's a very informal platform where you all are going to be able to unmute yourself, ask questions, and really share out ideas and thoughts. All right, so what we're going to do now is we really want to highlight what's going to be our virtual STEM studios for the summer. This summer, we are taking what we typically have as our STEM studio to virtual. So here you can see the different weeks that we're offering, and we have a quick little video we want to share with you just to give you a little snippet into what our STEM studio is really all about, and some of our past participants. So please oblige us for this quick little video on what our virtual STEM studio and our STEM studios are really all about.
Hi, I'm David Tong, Director of Programs at TGR Foundation. Through TGR EDU Create, we'll be offering our virtual STEM studio this summer to provide educators a multi-day training on inquiry-based learning. This is not your typical webinar experience, as throughout the week, STEM studio educators are engaged in interactive, interdisciplinary activities with our facilitators that promote the culture of inquiry. And participants will also have collaboration opportunities where they will be able to share lesson plans and receive feedback from each other to support their implementation based on the new strategies that they've gained during STEM Studio.
I would say that STEM Studios is unique because all of the training that you go through really encompasses inquiry-based and student-based learning, where students can really guide the instruction versus teachers guiding the instruction. And I think that that is the way of the future with our students becoming positive citizens.
The collaboration between all of the other participants that have been here has been invaluable. Learning what they do back in their schools, having that opportunity to share ideas and share practice has been a really valuable experience.
I went from asking the questions and forming them myself to helping students pull out their questions and develop what it is they want to learn, not just what I want them to learn.
I feel equipped with, tangible tools and intangible tools to go back to my classroom and to my school and to my country and put these things in play for the betterment of the kids that I directly facilitate with and the organizations that I'm associated with.
STEM Studio is allowing me to be able to make what I teach much more practical for the student, because here I've been able to become a student again and find out how I can learn and also have fun at the same time.
All right. So just a little quick snippet of what our STEM Studio is all about. Here you can see the different weeks that are being offered and the link that you can use to register. We certainly hope that you come back in the summer for one of these weeks and be a part of it and share all your ideas with other educators. Just in closing, we do want to have you stay connected with us. Again, just mentioning our Create Cafe, which is going to follow this workshop right after. So please hang on if you guys want to hang on, ask any questions about anything, or to continue the conversation about project-based learning. Also, this is part 2 on a workshop that we did on project-based learning. You can find all of our other workshops on our YouTube channel on TGR Foundation. We have resources for you as well as your students at TGR EDU explore.org. Great lesson plans that are free for you to download. And last but not least, keeping connected with us in our educator community. You can sign up here at tgrfoundation.org, educator community. So
I'll also add, Holly, sorry, if I can also add, TGR EDU Explore just had our virtual launch party. So there is a new asset on there that allows for online professional development. There is a professional development model called Redefining STEM that is already live and active. So guys, we highly encourage you to go in there. You'll see a familiar face here, but also one of our educators highlighted as we talk about what STEM is and how to redefine it to really meet the needs of the students. So again, TGR EDU Explore has had a facelift, and we're excited to share that with you and hope you guys will visit that and start some online professional development as well as join us in these sessions continually.
Awesome. Thanks, Jess. And last but not least, we really, really value your input. So we have put a link in the chat box for a survey. We value, again, your opinions on this digital workshop. So please, please, please make sure to go into that link and fill out our survey. All right, anyone with any last comments, thoughts, feel free to continue in the chat box here. Please hang on with us for Create Cafe. We'd love to hang out with you longer. All right, thanks everybody.